Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Olga. I am speaking now from Berlin and I'm currently completing my master's degree in comparative Indo-European linguistics at Humboldt University of Berlin. During my studies, I learned several ancient languages. Some of them are Sanskrit, Old Persian, Hittite, Hieroglyphic Luwian, Latin, and for the past 3 years, my hobby was Lithuanian. I've been tutoring some lessons in Lithuanian, in Sanskrit, and introductory courses in historical linguistics. I'm also currently working on a research project aimed at editing all old Lithuanian texts up to 1,000 words. But today I will be speaking not about Old Lithuanian, but about modern Lithuanian language. And I will try to uncover the truth behind its claimed antiquity. And I will demonstrate why this language is particularly important for Indo-European linguistics. The idea of this presentation hit me one day when I was searching the web for some exciting material for my students about ancient languages. So to my astonishment, the first recommended source about ancient languages was not only misleading, but it was quite nonsensical. It suggested that Lithuanian was, with its age of 5,000 years, place 7 of the oldest languages in the world. So first of all, I would like to make clear that this statement doesn't make any sense. Languages are evolving all the time from one language into another. And since we don't know anything about the oldest language in the world, and the written sources developed much later than the first languages emerged, and the beginnings of the history of languages are not documented. So it doesn't make any sense to talk about any single language as the oldest or, not the oldest. Rather, we should talk about conservative features of particular languages. The historical linguists who study the evolution of languages, they were able to prove that from this list, Sanskrit, Greek, Lithuanian, and Farsi are in fact descendants of the same language, which we call the Proto-Indo-European, and are therefore of the same age. The Proto-Indo-European, according to the most widespread hypothesis, was spoken somewhere here in the Pontic-Caspian steppe, approximately 3,000 to 4,000 years before Christ, somewhere north of the Caucasian Mountains, where today's border between the eastern Ukraine and southwest Russia lies. Proto-Baltic peoples, Proto-Baltic tribes, migrated to the north over here, probably as a unity with the Slavic tribes, which we can infer due to multiple similarities between the Baltic and the Slavic languages, not only in the words, but in the language structure. When they settled down, Proto-Baltic tribes had contacts with Finns in the north. And in fact, the Finns during that period were still nomadic peoples, and from the Balts, they learned of the settled way of life, and this can be shown from multiple borrowings in Finnic languages, which are related to agricultural terms and animal husbandry. The Balts also had some other contacts, such as Illyrians, Thracians, and Scythians, but all those languages have died out. So from that Indo-European homeland, Indo-European languages have spread to every single continent, every single inhabited continent of our planet. And in fact, Indo-European language family is the most widespread in the world, with 3.2 billion native speakers almost everywhere around the globe. On this map, you can see dark blue countries marked where an Indo-European language is spoken natively by the majority of the population, and with light blue are the countries marked where Indo-European is an official language, probably among others. So Indo-European language family is not only the most widespread, it is also the best researched family in the world. The research of Indo-European language family started approximately 200 years ago, with the first publication coming out in 1816 in Berlin. And since then, a lot of discoveries have been made, and a lot of artifacts have been found by archaeologists. So we can study the relationship between those languages and the origin of those languages. It is common to put language relationships, to show them in the form of the trees. This practice originates in Darwin's theory of evolution. And if you look at this particular tree, it doesn't show all Indo-European languages, but it tries to show the amount of speakers of a particular Indo-European language. And if you look, here's our Lithuanian, is a tiny space with just about 3 million speakers worldwide. And if you look at a different, more schematic representation of a language tree, here's our Balto-Slavic branch of languages. As I told you, Baltic and Slavic peoples left the homeland together, so they also evolved their language together until a certain point in time, and then they split into 2 separate groups, and then the Baltic languages in turn split into 2 different groups as well, into the Eastern group and into the Western group. So the Western group is only represented by the now extinct Old Prussian language, the last speaker of which died in the early 18th century. And both Eastern Baltic languages, the Lithuanian and Latvian, are spoken until today. The West and the East Balts began to diverge in their speech around 1000 before Christ, and their languages became distinct not later than 300 years before Christ. So approximately 800 years later, around 500 years AD, the northern part of the East Slavic tribes began to change rapidly. And the final syllables became shortened, the stress patterns changed, and the whole linguistic system became restructured. Those East Balts, which also settled in a different territory, somewhat northern, they gave rise to a language we called Latvian. The southern part of the East Balts remained, and their language stayed very archaic, and this is the language we now call Lithuanian. So now, since we established the lineage of Lithuanian, I would like to talk about the possible reasons why anyone would claim that this could be one of the oldest languages in the world. Perhaps one of the first things you think, why would anyone call a language an old one, is due to its textual transmission. And if we examine Lithuanian, this is certainly not the case. The oldest written record of an Indo-European language is in Hittite, written in Hittite language, an ancient language of Anatolia. And the written documents, the oldest document is the so-called Anita text, transmitted around 2000 before Christ. And this is very different with Lithuanian language. Writing was introduced in Lithuania during the Middle Ages, along with Christianity. And during that time, Lithuanian leaders maintained their contacts with Western nations and the Pope in Rome in Latin. Latin was also the language of scholarly elite during those times, so it is not surprising that the first publications concerning Lithuanian history and culture were in Latin language. One of the most notable of such works is De Moribus Tartarorum Lituanorum et Moscovorum. It is a treatise published by a person under pseudonym Michalo Lituanus. And this treatise was written as late as the middle of the 16th century and not published until 1615. It contains some historical information and on the Lithuanians and other peoples and around their neighbors. It compares Lithuanian pagan traditions to ancient Roman traditions, and it also lists 74 Lithuanian words and compares them to similarly sounding Latin words. Numerous Latin books were written by Lithuanian authors during that time, and they were published in Krakow, Riga, and Vilnius. In fact, the first printing press started in Vilnius in 1522. And alone in the 16th century, there were 158 Latin books published in Vilnius. But the first real Lithuanian book, written in Lithuanian language, was the Catechism by Martinas Mažvydas, which was printed in 1547 in Königsberg, or today's Kaliningrad. The book marks the beginning of Lithuanian literature and is therefore considered to be the most important artifact of Lithuanian history. It consists of a primer, a catechism, a book of songs with notes, a prayer book, a translation of Holy Writ, and an original prefaces and dedications. The book was aimed at spreading Protestant religion and fighting the remains of pagan beliefs. And it was very important to Martinas Mažvydas, the author of the book, to make it accessible to a broader audience. So he also called it the simple words of catechism, and the language of his work is quite simple. Here's the first page of text from the catechism, and excuse me for the suboptimal quality, but there's one thing I would like to show you. The first page, the title page of the catechism, doesn't mention the authorship, but the author perpetuated his own name, and if you by composing an acrosticon, so if you start reading the first letters of each line, starting from the third line, M-A-R and so on, you will have the spelled out Latinized version of Martin's name, Martinus Mažvydas. Another Lithuanian book I would like to share with you is the Preußische Litau. As the title suggests, it is written in German, which was quite common practice. Lots of Germans had contacts with Lithuanians in the ancient times, and lots of Germans wrote books about Lithuanians. So this is the first ethnographic account of Lithuanians, and though it was written in 1690, it is very accessible to a modern reader and is extremely entertaining. Though not everything is quite politically correct in this book, and not all facts are indeed true. But the interesting thing is that out of 15 chapters dealing with religion, culture, and customs of Lithuanian people, it features one chapter on Lithuanian language. And there are some riddles and proverbs and fun facts about Old Lithuanian language and theories about genetic relationships. So now, obviously, the Lithuanians claimed antiquity is not due to its attestation. Let's turn to the writing system. Perhaps most of you know that the first writing system which we know of was developed by the Sumerian people in Mesopotamia about 3000 before Christ, and obviously not Lithuanians. And Lithuanians, as I've mentioned, they adopted writing during Christianity and used Latin at first, so they also adapted the Latin alphabet to their needs. Their alphabet, their modern alphabet, though it changed slightly over time, but nowadays the Lithuanian alphabet is comprised of 32 letters with some additional diacritical marks to mark length in vowels and the typical Baltic and Slavic palatalized sounds, ch, sh, so on. And it is largely a phonetic writing system, so you can learn to read Lithuanian almost instantly. There are some digraphs used, and one curious fact about Lithuanian alphabet is that letters f, h, and ch are only used in loan words, and were actually not used way back. So if you happen to come from France, you're not from France in Lithuanian, you're from Prancūzija. Another idea about antiquity comes from Lithuanian lexemes, because Lithuanian language retained very many ancient lexemes, and this is the area here marked with names of rivers which can be etymologized to Lithuanian or Baltic words. And this was the area of impenetrable forests, and the Balts populated this area approximately from 2000 before Christ to 1000 before Christ. And they were basically undisturbed by anyone, and were a little bit further located from all the major migrations. That's why they could retain quite a bit of archaic vocabulary. And today, this territory, the territory where Baltic languages are being spoken, is much, much smaller. And when you're traveling through this small area, and if you engage in conversations with Lithuanians about their own language, you're bound to hear something like, our language is particularly old and ancient because there are so many words in Sanskrit that are just the same in Lithuanian. And this is indeed true. If you check this list, this is not an extensive list. There are way more lexemes that could be found between those two languages, which sound approximately the same. But I would like to make it clear that it is very important not to make decisions about a genetic relationship between languages based on similarity in lexemes, because just imagine such a scenario. If a few hundred years from now, a person would examine English words and English language and all the technical terms related to computers and internet and all the different languages of the world, then you could probably decide that English is the mother tongue of all languages, just because there are some words some words are the same in all the languages of the world. So this is, of course, nonsense. The real, true way to establish a genetic relationship between several languages is a systematic comparison of their grammatical features. So quoting Wikipedia's page on Lithuanian grammar retains many archaic features from Proto-Indo-European that have been lost in other Indo-European languages and is consequently very complex. And this claim is true. All aspects of Lithuanian language, including phonetics, grammatical structure, lexicon, are still comparatively archaic. And comparatively meaning compared to modern Indo-European languages, other modern Indo-European languages. So I will present you now with some facts about those archaic features, but please don't think that this list is extensive. One of the less complex features of Lithuanian is the future tense. In order to build future tense in Lithuanian, you have to remove the T element of the infinite of the word, of the verb. So if you have dirbti, which means to work, you remove the T element, which marks the infinitive, and you add suffix s, and then you attach to this suffix personal endings. So this suffix s is very old. In fact, if you compare again Lithuanian and Sanskrit, Sanskrit also uses this s element to build future tense. And not only this future tense marker s, but also the sound s itself is has been preserved in Lithuanian in every single position, and this is a unique feature which only Lithuanian can boast about of all Indo-European languages. Another archaic feature of Lithuanian is, and this is the most important feature, is the nominal declension. So apart from some loan words such as tabu or taxi, all Lithuanian words, including proper names, are being inflected. There are 7 inherited cases in total, so the nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, instrumental, locative, and vocative. So depending on the last vowel or the last sound of the stem, of the noun stem, nouns are divided, they belong to one of the 5 declensions, types of declensions. And this is a really ancient feature of the Proto-Indo-European. Maybe some of you who learned the classical language, such as Latin or Sanskrit, know this feature that you don't learn one declension, but you systematically learn one after another. This is the case in Lithuanian as well. So now you look at this table, and if you compare this to English language, where if you want to express something like that, all you need to know is the word itself and how to build plural. So if you take book, you say books, or if it's a bit more complicated, you say mouse and mice. Well, in Lithuanian, you first need to identify the stem class the word belongs to. Then you need to think about its grammatical gender. Then you need to think about the number. And afterwards, you think about the function in the sentence. And only afterwards, you need to pick the right ending from this table. You attach it to the word, and then you're done. So, you could say, well, English is an extreme example of an analytical language, but such languages as Russian also have a complex system of nominal declension. But in the nominal declension of Lithuanian, there are some special archaic features. So the locative case, for example, is constructed without a preposition. So So in order to say in Berlin, in Lithuanian, you just say Berlinie. Without the preposition you would need to use in Russian language or in English language. This element is is in fact also very archaic, as well as the s element again in the locative plural of Lithuanian, so druskininko se, and this s element it's of ancient age. Another case is vocative case. This is the list of all the endings you would need to know for the vocative case. So if you address a person by his name or by profession or by family status or something similar, you would need to learn all of those endings. And if you just say, let's say Vytautas is a very popular Lithuanian name. If you say Vytautas, it's just the nominative case. And if you would want to talk to Vytautas or ask Vytautas something, you would need to say Vytautai. If you ask yourself why Lithuanian retained all those endings and why the nominal declension system is so intact compared to other Indo-European languages, well, this is due to the accentuation. And this is the next point. So the accentuation in other Indo-European languages has changed massively. And the example of Germanic languages is perhaps the best. So before the Germanic languages split into separate languages and developed into what we know as modern English, Swedish, Danish, German, and so on, they fixed stress on the initial syllable at the very beginning of the word. And when languages do that, the tendency is for the last syllable to be pronounced less effectively, and after hundreds of years pass, those syllables are lost, and that's how Germanic languages lost their declension endings. Well, Lithuanian kept the accentuation, although it didn't keep the original Proto-Indo-European accentuation, but what it did keep is the pitch accent and mobile stress, which is unfortunately not marked in the everyday text. And if you're learning Lithuanian, this is one of the hardest features to learn, because also even some textbooks don't mark the stressed syllable. And if I would want to include the tables of all the stress patterns, my slides would be doubled, and there would be no end to my presentation. So I would just leave for now this topic and say that accentuation of Lithuanian is a complicated matter, and it's been studied for decades, and still it's very complicated until today. So the last point is the Lithuanian syntax. It is normally an SVO language, but it does have a comparatively free order. So with the sentence vakar, bareš, baragau, skanaus, alaus, you can change the word order. But keep in mind that with the changed order, you would stress different information, different part of the sentences. So to finish off, I would like to also mention some innovations that Lithuanian did. Lithuanian has seen multiple phonological changes. For instance, all the palatalizations, which are common both to Baltic and Slavic languages. It lost ablative case. It adopted additional locative cases. It developed definite adjectives. It regularized the gradation of adjectives and adverbs. Especially the verbal system has been drastically reduced. Some tenses, such as aorist and perfect tense, were lost. The optative mood was lost. The middle voice was also lost, and instead Lithuanian uses reflexive verbs for that. And it developed a very complex system of participles. This list is also not extensive, and it would be a topic for a different presentation. But what I would like to take you from this presentation is the fact that Lithuanian is a very archaic language with multiple conservative features, and that is why it is very important for Indo-European linguists. Thank you very much for your attention, and now it's question time. I will be reading now the first question. What is the current status of the theory that East and West Baltic split apart before Proto-Slavic split from Baltic? This is a very good question. This is a question that has been disputed since the very beginning of the Indo-European studies. I'd say it is quite clear that Baltic and Slavic developed together, then split from each other, and then the East and West Baltic languages split in their turn. Most of the similarities between those are then due to close contact, since there was no consequent migration during those times. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. The next question: do you think Lithuanian will evolve and lose some of its conservative features as a result of globalization? Yes and no. So I wouldn't say that the result of globalization is the reason why Lithuanian would lose its conservative features. But yes, Lithuanian is losing its conservative features all the time. Right now, Lithuanian is losing its conservative features. And if you speak some Lithuanian, and if you know things about accentuation markings, and you go out there and talk to a young population in towns, especially in Vilnius and in Kaunas, then you will notice that they are stressing syllables in a different way, not the way the textbook suggests you should stress. This, as I told you immediately, this will result in the some changes in morphological structure of the language. So one example would be, it is according to textbooks, it is correct to say skanus for tasty, with the stress on the last syllable, and Lithuanian youth is often saying skanus instead of skanus. So there you can see this shift in stress from the end of the word to the beginning of the word, and immediately you notice that the last syllable is pronounced less stressed, and at some point it will disappear. But this will not be in our lifetime. Languages don't evolve that fast. The next question: are Lithuanian cases more complex than other languages with 7 cases? Well, complexity is a difficult question to assess. If you assess by the elements of sounds that are there present in the ending syllables, then yes, it is indeed. So we were talking. I was talking about this S, which has been well preserved in Lithuanian. Maybe if you had to deal with Lithuanian language, you notice that Lithuanians attach endings as to the ending as to very many nouns. So the obvious example is name. You're lucky if you're called Thomas, you're immediately Lithuanian with the ending as. But if you're called, I don't know, let's say Niels, you would become Nilsas in Lithuanian. And this as element, that's very different in Slavic languages. You don't attach this element, it is not necessary. And it's an ancient element, and it also appears in some other cases, not only in the nominative case. The nominative case is the best example. So if you would take that as the measure for complexity, then the answer to that question is yes, the Lithuanian system is more complex. And it is one of the main reasons why this particular language and not some Slavic language would be taken as example for an archaic Indo-European language. The next question is, how similar are Latvian and Lithuanian? Well, there are multiple differences between Latvian and Lithuanian, and if you're Lithuanian and you take a written text in Latvian, you will be able to understand some words, but those peoples are not able to converse with each other. So if you take Slavic languages as an example, Slavic languages are famous for having least divergences between each other compared to all other sub-branches, subgroups of Indo-European languages. So if you happen to speak a Slavic language, only one Slavic language, and you go to a different Slavic country, you will be probably understood. This is not the case with Latvian and Lithuanian. In fact, I just started learning Latvian, and it's like starting from scratch. And I know some differences due to historical phonology between those two languages, but the accentuation of Latvian has changed, and when those two languages split from each other around 500 years AD, there were, until the 7th century, the differences were really massive. So you need to separately learn each of those languages. The next question is, what are your recommendations for people interested in learning Lithuanian? Oh, I'm very happy you asked. My recommendation is do as much as possible, but the first recommendation is visit Lithuania and spend some time there. I visited Lithuania several times. If you're a student, you might want to check some scholarships offered by the Lithuanian government and do a summer course there. If you're not a student, you can still participate in the summer courses of Kaunas University and Vilnius University, and I'm not sure, but I think some other universities or language centers are also offering language courses during summer months. If you're a student, you can also take a semester and do Erasmus program and do one semester with different courses, not only Lithuanian courses, but also taking your subjects you're interested in Lithuanian. Another tip, if you happen to come from Berlin, there is a summer course in Berlin, free of charge, but the participant number is very limited. So if you're interested in this course, please contact me privately, send me an email or so. Otherwise, you can also contact me. I am doing online lessons on Lithuanian language, so that would be another possibility to learn Lithuanian. Well, the last recommendation is there are accentuated books on Lithuanian language, some learning materials, and use those. If you, I don't know what your mother tongue is, but depending on your mother tongue, I could recommend you some materials. You can write me an email or contact me in the chat group of Polyglot Gathering, and I would be happy to recommend you some learning materials. The next question is, do native speakers make mistakes stressing the correct syllable? Well, I think I've answered that question already. Yes, it is one of those things where parents and children argue a lot with parents and, especially grandparents saying, you're pronouncing so wrongly and you're Lithuanian so incorrect. The next question, are all of these archaic and seemingly very complex grammatical structures kept in colloquial speech? The ones I presented today are all kept in the regular speech. I kept the other ones for myself. So the features Old Lithuanian has, which is, for instance, rests of dual, dual number. So the Proto-Indo-European had 3 numbers. If you already thought that the nominal declension of Lithuanian is complex, you should check out the Proto-Indo-European declension system. It's 8 cases and 3 different numbers. So Old Lithuanian has some rests of dual and there are some other features, archaic features, which only Old Lithuanian has and Modern Lithuanian is lost. But those I talked about today are all archaic, all still used nowadays. So the next question is how puristic is Lithuanian? Is there a wide tendency to Lithuanianize words? Yes. It is a clear tendency to do that, and there are multiple examples where some complex Lithuanian words are formed to express something you would say with an English word, but language evolves in a kind of natural way, and you can't really force. You can try to force certain changes, but it will be impossible to completely remove words like chatas or something like that from Lithuanian. So I think the last question is: do Lithuanian as for future and ancient Greek as for future, like Nikeso, I will win, have the same origin? Yes, they do. And it's the same as that is also used in Sanskrit. So thank you very much for your questions. And if you happen to have any more questions, or if you happen to have a particular interest in Lithuanian language or in historical linguistics, please feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to answer all your questions. And thank you very much, and have fun with the rest of the event.